Welcome, everyone. My name is Selena, and I am part of the Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles webinar team at the Foundation for Inner Peace. The mission of the Foundation for Inner Peace is to publish, distribute, and discuss A Course in Miracles. And we are holding these Let's Discuss online webinars as an expression of our vision of extending love through A Course in Miracles teachings. Before I introduce today's webinar, I invite you to join me in prayer. From the text, chapter 2. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal. Now it's time to introduce our web event, which explores ways we can better listen and become more receptive to holy guidance. Our session today is how to listen to the Holy Spirit. Whatever is happening to us, individually or collectively, A Course in Miracles tells us we can ask for guidance from the Holy Spirit. But even if we trust the Holy Spirit to decide for us, how do we truly hear its divine guidance? So with that, I would like to welcome Foundation for Inner Peace team members and guests. We have Tam Morgan, President, Foundation for Inner Peace, Diane Bruk-Gusick, and Reverend Emmanuel Rosenthal, both staff members at the Foundation. We also have Foundation volunteer, Jim Hagopian, and longtime A Course in Miracles practitioner and guest panelist, Kevin Castle. So hello, everyone, and welcome to you all.
Hi, my name is Tam Morgan, and I'm serving as the president for Foundation for Inner Peace. And I never had a question or an issue around listening to the Holy Spirit. I was born with a very wide open channel in that way. And as a little girl, was very clear I was talking to my friend who was bigger than everything in the world. And my mother supported that and didn't help me close that down. In fact, she did the opposite. So it's not been an issue. I'm very aware of the difference between that voice and my ego voice. And I've learned as I get older that I feel very lucky for that.
My name is Diane Bruk-Gusick. I have been a student of the course for over 40 years. I serve as the co-lead on the translation program for the Foundation of Inner Peace, and I'm also the academic advisor. And independently, I've been teaching classes almost for as long as I picked up the book. I do not hear a direct voice, so how to listen to the Holy Spirit has been something that I have thought about for a long time. And I guess the best advice that I hope we'll be sharing today is, for me, the best way to listen to the Holy Spirit is to notice when I'm in judgment, to notice when I'm critical, to notice when I'm frightened, and then not to judge myself, to let it be what it is. And that opens something up in me. So hopefully we'll talk more about that.
My name is Emmanuel Rosenthal, and I started out with the Foundation answering student questions and have done some writing, some of the FAQs and the student, what is it called now? The student handbook. And started the Let's Discuss Facebook group, and been a little less active lately, but I'm all in. And the Holy Spirit is the central everything of my life. I'll talk more about that later.
Thanks. Emmanuel. Yeah. Jim.
Hello, my name is Jim Hagopian, and usually I'm behind the scenes doing technical support on Zooms, and I was honored to be asked to participate in this panel. I've been a student of the course for 40 years or something, just way back. I should get the date right, just so I know exactly when it started. And it's just been amazing how over the years, the material seems like it's new. That there's things I see all the times. There's different messages that I'm getting that I missed entirely before. So it's a very alive course. And this whole topic of the Holy Spirit, you're going to meet my buddy Kevin here in a minute. But there's a terminology thing with the course. And I actually personally have never been comfortable with the word Holy Spirit. And I think it may have to do with my Christian upbringing. So I found myself understanding it as the spiritual voice of holiness. And that really helped me start understanding that and it's not like it's either there or not. What I realize it's always there. It's just whether or not I'm in a place where I can hear it or not. So I'm very excited to be here, and blessings to everybody.
Hello, my name is Kevin Castle, and I'm in Palm Desert, California. The course came into my life. My mother was in a Unity church, and she came home from a class one day and laid down these 3 hardcover blue books. And I'd, always sort of been a spiritual seeker, and I couldn't put them down. I was just paging and just loved it. And that started my journey. And the study groups that I go to now, one of them I've been going to for, over 25 years. And for me, doing the 365, doing the lessons is where I connected with the Holy Spirit. That was for me the purpose. And it literally was like, in the epilogue where it says, now you have a capital F friend, So I'm very grateful for this group and for our books. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So in listening to you all, I know Emmanuel said the Holy Spirit has become central to everything in her life. Jim said spiritual voice of holiness. Kevin said capital F friend. And especially those listening to us today, many are new to the course. Can we unpack this concept of Holy Spirit a little bit more and go around and dive a little bit deeper into Holy Spirit before we start talking about when we don't listen to the Holy Spirit? So define a little bit more what Holy Spirit is according to the course and your experience of it.
I would like to say that very bottom line, we're talking, there's so many levels to the course, but bottom line, the Holy Spirit is, forgive the word, merely a thought. It's a memory of unity that we're all part of. That's what the Holy Spirit is at the bottom line. And the manifestation of that Holy Spirit is Jesus. And either of them are interchangeable and a thought of healing and love. And to contradict that thought of healing and love, and often very loud in our mind because we're focused on it, is the ego, which is also a thought. It is the opposite of love. It's a separated belief system that when I look at it, anyone and everyone in my vision is going to be experienced by me as some kind of a challenge. So because I didn't grow up hearing the Holy Spirit as a voice, I had no idea until I came to the course that experience was even a possible one. And because I really didn't want to pretend to be hearing something, I was hungry to find peace. What I had to do was slowly, and what I still do on a daily basis, is slowly look at those places where I'm making a judgment or I'm frightened. Both of those are good defenses for me. I either make a judgment, making myself, I know, or I'm frightened, really screaming for help. When that happens, I sort of trained myself to have a genuine giggle that I, who have studied this for so long, who have worked with the workbook on a daily basis, have something come up that shows me that my mind, which is really choosing, is often choosing for the ego. And in looking at that and not getting guilty, and I just a sidebar, I remember the first time I heard that the way that you awaken from this dream is you don't get guilty, but you do take responsibility for what you're choosing to think. And I remember saying to my close friend then, what do you mean you don't get guilty? How could you do something like that and not be guilty? Training myself not to be guilty when I recognize that I've just thought or done something murderous is the release of my guilt and the beginning of my expanding into something larger that I think is what some people experience as the Holy Spirit.
Well, I always love the scholarly approach because what the course says, I mean, the course itself is a very scholarly material. And so hearing that, it just kind of, in my mind, I go, check, yes, that's right. That sounds right. But I come at it from a much more intuitive space. And I don't overthink it. And not that that was overthinking, but in my being, I'm not an intellectual and I don't think about it. It's just present. And I love that you said F, capital F friend, and that the course says that, because that was my first experience. It was, I would talk in my room as soon as I could talk and yak at night before I went to sleep. And my mother finally came in one night. She always listened by the door because she get to hear what was going on in the day and for me and what I was feeling about it. And she said, who are you talking to? And I said, my friend. And she said, oh, is your friend, little imaginary being? And I said, no. And she said, well, they said, it's bigger than that. And she said, oh, bigger than a bread box. And I went, yeah, bigger than a bread box. And she kept going bigger. And I said, oh, my friend is everywhere and everything. And there it was. There was no work to find that voice. I mean, I work more to surrender, even though that's not even quite the word, but it is in a way, to what that voice is telling me when my ego disagrees completely with it. And I guess we'll get more into that later. But the experience when I'm in alignment with that voice is very much one of alignment. And my character is very rebellious. So I like to rebel even from that voice to test it out. And I used to call it a form of spiritual cutting, because, okay, you're telling me this, so I'm going to try that and see what happens. And it's never good, but I would do it anyway, just to test it out that, yes, this voice is telling me, guiding me and aligning me with truth. And it's always loving, even though my ego doesn't always find it loving.
And Tam, I just want to ask you, is it a voice like the way we think of a voice, or how and has it changed over the years?
That's a really good question, Jim. It comes in words, for sure. Words come through when I need to ask a question. I'll either hear words or I'll see something in a funny sign, or in my mind on a screen, if I do it that way. But usually I just hear the words. So I don't hear a specific voice. It's much more like a vibration that turns into words. So it's not like, oh, yes, that sounds just like Jim. That voice sounds just like Jim. In talking voice, it's not the same as a speaking voice. It's just a communication voice, if that makes any sense.
And is that similar to what Helen said about when she got the material?
I would never, ever presume to know. I don't know what's similar to anyone else's being, because everyone has their own different psychological and emotional and spiritual way of coming to whatever they are hearing, all in a range from complete feeling of ecstatic truth to complete, being psychotic. There is a range, and I find it fascinating, and I'm sorry, this is a side thing, but I am finding it fascinating that people who are diagnosed schizophrenic or hearing voices are choosing not to medicate because they're becoming friends with these voices. Now, are those voices of truth, or are those just more personalities that they're coming to terms with? I don't know. And I can't say what mine is. I can only tell anyone that's been my truth. And it's never been wrong. And when I say never, I mean 100% of the time when I hear that in that way, it's just not wrong. As bizarre as it may even be or sound, it keeps showing itself to be right. And I'm still to this day amazed by it. It's like, no, you're not really, really right. No, this time you may just be a little off. And again, it shows to be true. So did I answer your questions?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
I have, thank you for sharing that, Tam. I have similar experiences. I'll admit this. I was in the course going to study groups 2 and 3 times a week for decades, and I never did the 365. I would start it, I'd stop it, start it, I'd stop it. And it was all a thing of self-judgment. Oh, I didn't do the 5 minutes 3 times a day. Well, then I'm just going to forget doing it. And that went on for, I'm telling you, 30 years. But I love the course. I love the talking about it, reading about it, all that. Well, finally, I got the direction to do it. When I finished the 365, which took me 3 years to do, and I was doing it under some specific guidelines that Holy Spirit gave me, that's when I was introduced to that capital F friend. It was the process of doing those one after another every day for a period of time, and it developed, because it really does. It leads you through those last, 100 lessons, from 200 on, and they're all about talking to the Holy Spirit. And, in reading through the book, it's like they say that the 365 is all about introducing you to that internal teacher. So, and with regards to a voice, do I hear a voice? It started with sort of I had to, it's sort of like, for me, it was learning a new language. I heard a voice. I heard something, and like Tam was saying, sort of like it comes up from inside and becomes a voice. That's how I know it's the Holy Spirit, because it starts around here and then it kind of comes into a voice. But when I was new at it, I had to experiment. I had to try one thing, try what it said, or do, I had to experiment with figuring out where that Holy Spirit's voice was by interpreting it and learning how to interpret it. And now there's just no doubt, I know when it's the Holy Spirit. I sometimes I don't have to ask. I hear it and I follow the direction. I've actually kind of given it free reins. I said, Holy Spirit, if I'm ever in a life and death situation, please feel free to chime right in. And he has a few times, strangely enough. It is a process of, for me, doing the lessons and experimenting with talking to the voice, experimenting with asking questions.
Thank you, Kevin. So appreciate that. So we dive in a little bit deeper into this, because one of the questions we get the most is, how do I know what voice I'm listening to? How do I know it's the Holy Spirit versus the ego? What would you all like to share about your experience with that?
This sort of goes on the tail of what Kevin was just saying about it being, I forget the word you used, sorry, an experiment or something like that. I forget that, practicing as you went along. I like to say that it's a spiritual practice, like people do yoga or they do their meditation practice every day, or, you know, whatever it is. For me, learning to listen to the Holy Spirit is a spiritual practice. And it's amazing to me, as everyone's been saying, to see over the years how that's shown up in my life. And yeah, the voice speaks to me mostly in like a feeling, a sense, I don't mean feeling like emotion, but like when I first started reading the Course, so much of it was like, that is just not true, or that's not what I learned before. But something in it, something in me thought, no, this is truth. Pay attention. This is truth. So that whatever it is in me that could recognize that, knew that, okay, the Holy Spirit is speaking. I have had a few times in my life where I've actually heard not outside voice, but sounded like a voice actually speaking words to me. Usually it's not like that. I had a time on the freeway one night. I used to fall asleep sometimes driving, and somebody yelling my name twice. And I was like really irritated. Why are you yelling at me? And then I realized I was about to go off the road and run into an overpass. So it was like, yeah, I really needed a voice right then because I was asleep. I've had things like that happen a few times. And I'd probably be leery of more voice, like actual voice, like someone talking in my head, you know. But as I said, that place in me that knows the truth does receive those messages. And as other people have said, sometimes the message comes through another person. Sometimes the answer comes through a book. Sometimes it's from opening up the Course. You know, sometimes somebody calls with an answer. But, you know, the Course says, while you are here in the illusion, you have problems that you think need solving. And as long as you think you have problems, the Holy Spirit is here to help answer your questions. And every question will be answered. I mean, it's just like, you know, people go through the Course and it's hard and whatever. And it's like, if you stop to think about it, what an amazing thing. God gave us God's voice. It's in every single mind, every serial killer, every person, you know, everyone has it, whether they know it or not. We all have that. Wow. And that the help is there to, you know, for all of our problems and all of our questions. Now I forgot what the question was that was asked.
Oh,
how do you know the voice? How do you recognize? Yeah.
Versus the ego, or not hearing the voice.
Yeah, that's where, and I think it's, especially with newer students, it's really important to address that it's not whatever thought comes into your mind, you ask the Holy Spirit, and then you have a thought, oh, is that's my answer? Probably the first thought is the ego. And it might not be a thought at all. But that's where I say it's a practice. You know, it can take years maybe, but believe me, it is well worth the time. What else are you going to do with that time? You know, so that's it for now. Thank you.
I always kid that I came into the Course with a PhD in fear, but it's actually the way I experienced life. I just wasn't aware of it. So I know what fear feels like. How do I know that I'm listening to guidance? I know when I'm really at peace. I know when my internal experience is not in a tight ball. At that point, I know, in Course metaphor, I'm listening to the Holy Spirit. But I also recognize only since the Course when I'm in fear. And that's a signal to me that I need to step back. What does that mean in my experience? It means I need to let go, at least temporarily, of whatever I'm clutching onto, to be open to another way of seeing. And I tell myself, because as a fearful person, you always want to know that there's a handrail. I tell myself I can always go back to fear. but it's an active experience of letting go and being open to another way of seeing. I recently did a cross-country move. I don't know what I was thinking that I didn't realize it would be a challenge. What I did find, and I didn't make the time to read from the course every day. I didn't always do my lessons. And I do feel that the experience of doing the lessons helped you release so much. But what I found was something that once would have put me in an absolute panic did not. It was a very challenging move. I was not in fear. That to me was worth all the years that I studied the course. It is getting familiar with another choice that the mind can be making. And that's where the action is, back in the mind. For me, that's my experience.
Mind is all there is. You know, everything is mind. We're a thought in God's mind. And so it's all thought, all mind.
I'd like just to chime in and, at first, my connection to the Holy Spirit was, and I'll just use something, silly like, Holy Spirit, I really would like to go to Hawaii. So how can I go about doing that? It's like, I have to come to Holy Spirit with a completely blank slate. I mean, like almost that I've tried everything and then go, all right, I have nothing. I don't know what to do. I think I share that my best prayer ever, and I'm not a big guy about prayer either, but my best prayer, because I was in such fear about doing something, I just got alone and I just said, I can't do this. That was all. And I went and did what I had to do, and it was phenomenal because I just gave up me. I just let Holy Spirit work through me. The words came out. The prayer on page 28 just, gave me the words, showed me where to be, showed me what to do, because I had no idea what I should do. And as long as I'm coming from a place of, even if I'm kind of holding it in like, I really would like this, Holy Spirit, but what do you think? I've got to be cautious of that. I practically use it. I ride a motorcycle and I'm very open, before I get on, I test the brake lights, I test this, I stand there, I say, Holy Spirit, is this a good time for me to go? Because if it's not, I'll just shut this bike off right now. And I just check in with him first. There was a time I called Jim, even we talked about it, that I was really guided not to go on a ride. And it was like, I really wanted to do it, but I was just getting that feeling I shouldn't do it. So I have argued with the Holy Spirit. Here I am arguing with the creator of the universe, saying, no, I know better, Holy Spirit. And literally back and forth, sort of, arguing. So I've given that up too, one pass through. Okay, I got you, Holy Spirit.
For me, one of the experiences that I have that I know to be true for me is, if it's not kind, it's not the Holy Spirit. I mean, it's such an easy ask. It doesn't mean that your ego can't say something generated that's kind, but truly the voice that I have, or the feeling that comes with it, is it's kind. And it's pretty clearly that. So I can be upset or confused or something about something, but this kind voice comes in. It's also, and it's funny to put the two together, it's also somewhat neutral. There's not any judgment in it, whether I do it or not. It's just neutral. And I find in my own personality, the more I mimic neutrality, the more I become neutral like that voice. And it's a little bit like act as if and you will become, because that neutrality has no trigger in it. It has no, oh, I'm feeling this about that, or, oh, I want this or that. But the other thing that I say that is always controversial, or often controversial in especially course community, is I totally bargain with the Holy Spirit, have been since I was a little girl. No one ever told me I wasn't allowed to, or you can't do that. And I have found it the most playful relationship that I have of, oh, you want me to do that, Holy Spirit, then you got to give me that. And it always happens, but it doesn't always happen in the way that I anticipate at all. And in fact, it's usually upside down and inside out the way that it happens. So I can give an example. Let me think. One example was that I had to go give a talk. It was my first talk as the co-president of Foundation for Inner Peace. And I needed to go give it, and I didn't want to. Like, I'm not someone who loves that life of going out and giving talks. But I knew I had to. I heard I was to do this. And I said, okay, Holy Spirit, it was down south from, I live in Northern California. And I said, okay, but you really need to, give me somewhere to stay. On my way back, I want to go to Esalen, which is a lovely place, lovely kind of healing resort place. And I want to stay there, and I don't want to pay for it. And I just want to have somewhere to stay up there. And it's in the Big Sur area. So you got to know that. And it's like, yeah, go give the talk. So I give the talk. I'm supposed to leave that evening, and supposed to have a place. There's no place. So I'm talking with a lot of people are coming up to meet me, and I'm just trying to get out of there. It's like, yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like the talk. And this one person just was waiting patiently. And then he came up and we talked for a moment, and he said, I just want you to know that I have a home in Big Sur if you ever want to stay there. And I was like, oh, yay, Holy Spirit, good for you. And I said, can I stay tonight? He said, oh, not tonight. Tonight it's booked. It's like, okay, that was a funny little moment. But I always wanted to know someone who had a home there, because I go there, but frequented there at that time in my life quite often. So I didn't care. I drove up with nowhere to stay, and I went and I got into Esalen, and they have hot tubs, and I was sitting in the hot tubs, and it's now just before midnight, and I have nowhere to stay. I can't stay in Esalen for the night. They were booked. And I was like, I wonder how this is going to work. And there was someone else in one of the other hot tubs, and we both got out at the same time, and we were walking and somehow started a conversation. And it ended up, the short version was that he had this beautiful trailer, and he was given a room at Esalen before it was booked. And he told me I could spend the night if I wanted in his trailer. And it was this absolutely beautiful trailer. And there it was. And I had to meet this person because he ended up being involved in other things in my life later. So had I stayed at the first person's offer, it wouldn't have gone in that route. So there's an element of trust that goes with starting to hear that voice. You think you have a hunch and intuition, but you're not sure. Follow it and see where it goes. If it's a negative experience, probably is not the voice. It's just as if it's not kind. But if it leads you to humor and to laughter and to connection, it's probably the voice.
I'd like to just add to that. I think that's a great example of how I see the Holy Spirit answering us and working in the world. I've had people say to me, oh, the Holy Spirit can't do anything in the world. And I think, well, but what is the world? It's an illusion. Where is it? It's in my mind. Well, what else is in my mind? The Holy Spirit. It's all in my mind. So how can the Holy Spirit not do anything in the world if the world is in my mind? So that's my thinking anyway. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. But the Holy Spirit, as I said, is also in everybody else's mind. So for me, quite often, that's how answers will come. I'll have a question or a problem, and I'll say to the Holy Spirit, I really need help with this. Please help me. And I'll talk to someone, or that somebody will call, or somebody will show up and say, hey, I have a trailer, would you like to stay there? They're little miracles, but to me, that's the Holy Spirit in action, speaking, through my mind, through somebody else's mind, however you want to look at it.
Thank you. Jim, you talked about the Holy Spirit being to you the spiritual voice of holiness. So what examples might you share about the messages you've received in your mind or beyond in the
You know,
world?
what do you call it, moved to speak about is how, as we're talking about the Holy Spirit, I think it's important for me to share about how I'm probably more familiar with what isn't that voice. And I was trying to find this quote, and this is one of those things where I swear that the course said something about the ego speaks loudest and first. I was doing a search on the app, I couldn't find that quote, but it did say that the ego speaks first. And I was going to read the quote, but I don't really need to read the quote. But the idea is that I believe that we're so marinated, other than Tam, in ego, that we're so disconnected from this sense of being guided and being in this relationship. Well, actually, when I was young, Tam, it's funny. I saw I think you even said this in your story, Tim, in your book, that I saw the King of Kings, and that movie affected me so much, where I would be in conversation with Jesus like all the time, and Jesus was like the realest thing for me. And so that, I guess, became like the voice. But where I'm going with this is that as an adult, and after experiencing my fair share of being knocked off by my high holy spiritual horse, my high holy Course in Miracles course from challenges in life, I've recognized that the egoic programming is so dense and thick and permeating in this illusory level that if I can just notice that, oh my God, okay, I was just worried. Oh my God, I was just afraid. Oh my God, like all these people are saying all these things that are speculating these horrible outcomes. That's what the ego does. It can look at the most beautiful situation and it'll go, oh, there's got to be something wrong here. You know, what's the catch? And it's true that in the world we have to be aware, because oftentimes there are catches when we're invited to join up on one of the emails or whatever. We have to more than ever, we have to be aware and double check, triple check emails and things that we're invited to do, which I think is unfortunate, because I think that feeds into the egoic's power, the ego's power in myself, to be afraid, to be suspicious, to be protected. But if I can catch what that groove is, if I realize that, oh, okay, I just got onto the ego's track here, and I can simply I do this a lot. I'll just snap my fingers and say, I turn this over to spirit. That I don't know what to do with this information. I don't know what to do with this fear or this worry or this concern. And especially with the last couple of weeks, and I know we don't want to date this seminar, but with the mass shootings and things that the world appears to me, in my experience of this worldly experience, to be getting more and more insane. And what I'm noticing is there's folks like you guys listening and you guys on this conversation that are staying, probably even more so, turning to what we know is true above the battlefield, beyond the appearance of things. And it's not, it's like I know there's this thing about spiritually bypassing, and I've done my fair share of that in the past, and I probably still have a tendency to do that. But there's a difference between when the course talks about the last judgment being literally the last time that there was a judgment, like, oh, I'm not being judged. There's just no more judgment. That's so beautiful. When it talks about the vision of the truth, and again, words are very, I'll just say this and hope the energy comes through the words. When I am focused on the vision of knowing that, the experience of knowing that we're all connected, and that everything that is happening in this precise moment, and everything that ever happened in my imagination of the past, everything that's happening in my projection of the future, everything is exactly the way that I somehow agreed and participated and co-created and invited this experience in. And the difference is I can do it where the waves are crashing over me and I'm drowning, or I can get the surfboard out and enjoy the waves. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that unlike Kevin and Tam, I'm a person that probably doesn't feel like, oh, Holy Spirit just said this and do that. I'm a person that just will recognize if I'm going into fear places or stuck places or crazy places, that thank goodness through doing the course, that I'm able to catch it faster and then just release it. And in that place of releasing and just simply saying, help me with this. Like you were saying, Kevin, my ego self does not know what to do with this, but I know that my true self, which is one with you, God, which is one with Christ, which is one with the Holy Spirit, I know that my true self is exactly in the right place at the right time, even though it may be painful physically, even though it may look like a loss to the world. It's like Kevin has helped me a lot in situations to rise above the temporary dramas and recognizing, and I think successful investors do this too. They don't get scared when the market crashes or when the market, because they know it's going to come back up. And I think that there's this thing about over the years of doing the course and practicing the course, that there's this trust that I have that even if it doesn't seem like it's working out, it's going to work out. Even if it seems wrong, it's right, even though I'm not getting it at the moment. And a lot of times I'll sleep on something and the next morning, something will pop in. And so many times, like a door will close, I'll be upset about that door closing. And if instead of having grievances, which all my ego does is come up with grievances, if I am willing, like the course helps me do, to release the grievance and just go, okay, this is what was supposed to happen. I gave it my best shot. And so and I'm going to enter, and I'm being very wordy, but the one challenge and the struggle I have is that I am a big believer in total pedal to the metal, it's not ambition, but it's like commitment, intention. Like I'm into high-powered, high-octane living. My light is falling for you. And so sometimes there are times when I get confused as far as when I'm getting the message to cool something, I don't get it at first, and I'm still pushing through it and still thinking I can make this happen. So if there's an area that I would love more clarity on, and I think this conversation will help too, is to know the difference between when no, don't give up. Just keep going for it. Be persistent. Just stay committed. Make the intention. Stay committed, knowing that you are in harmony with the Holy Spirit, with the flow. But to know also when there's those times where something isn't connecting, something isn't happening the way that I envisioned it possibly being able to happen, and gracefully saying, okay, I feel content in knowing that I gave it my all. I gave it the 100% that I was supposed to, and this is where I am, and I can be at peace with that without feeling like it's a failure or a loss. Because I think the course, there's no failure, there's no loss in reality, Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Diane.
I think that what Jim is expressing is an experience of knowing that there's choice. So if it feels like, and I don't know if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, Jim, so stop me if I'm not, but if it feels like I'm going full throttle on something and I see that it's not going to work out, instead of panicking or projecting my anger, it's a knowing or a beginning to know I have a choice about this. I think that all the action of the course is in our knowing we have choice. And I don't experience that as an intellectual construct. For me, moving from fear to a knowing that I have choice, I'm open, I'm letting go and sensing how to experience this has been worth the price of the admission to the course. And I want to comment also on something that Emmanuel said, that many people say that the Holy Spirit can't do anything in the world. Those of us who were Ken Wapnick students might express it slightly differently, but I think this is what you're responding to. And again, for me, it's a very real understanding that permeates my life. The Holy Spirit, Jesus, and I really do use them interchangeably, and I always find it interesting how I go to one or I go to the other, and there's no rational thought about why I go to one or why I go to the other. It's a choice I'm making to remember peace. It has nothing to do with the specific. And that doesn't mean that I, Diane, don't have specific things that I want to happen. But my inner experience is either one of peaceful or crazy. And something else that, and that's it. And I am at least aware of that. Something that I find interesting is when I started in this course, I had no clue what I was getting into. I don't even know why I went to it. But it was Diane Gusick. Well, yeah, I was Diane Gusick at that time. This physical being was going to this lecture and then picked up a book, and this physical being was reading this book. Well, fast forward 20, 30 years, at a certain point, this physical being was realizing that there was a whole other level that was being discussed. So this physical being was having a glimpse of a spiritual level that she never knew existed. I don't think you graduate from this course until you are reading it as a spiritual being who is so delighted to understand what it is experiencing. I think that most of us are still, and that may be a total projection, I am still very often reading it as a physical being aware that there's a greater level. But there's a difference. And when you're at a point when there are glimpses of, yes, that has nothing to do with anything specific. That is an experience. And I think what I'm asking everyone to do is have patience in trying to hear the voice for the Holy Spirit, or even in hearing the voice, not to get locked into, I will get, so much as, yes, that experience of oneness. And that's where I think he's pushing us to and leading us to. He says, and in preparation for this, I actually found the quote because I think it's such a good quote. But in chapter 25, in the link to truth, in that 5th paragraph, he says, since you believe that you are separate, heaven presents itself to you as separate too. Not that it is in truth, but that the link that has been given you to join the truth may reach to you through what you understand. Father and Son and Holy Spirit are as one, as all your brothers join us as one in truth. Now, if that's your daily experience, you're home. If your daily experience is wondering if it's going to be another 90-degree day like I've just moved into, or wondering if my new neighbor will smile at me, that's a whole other level of being. And I can step back and come to peace, but don't get stuck there. Don't stop until you're awake, would be what I want for myself.
And I'd like to bring up something, because we're talking so specifically about the voice that we each hear. And I'd like to say that there's one really, really funny aspect to it, which is we each might hear something different. Mm-hmm. And that confuses people so much. Well, I just heard this. And so, you know, how come you're not hearing that? And it's like, we're very different configurations in our dream of personality. And we hear what's right for, for ourselves. And we can go broader, and we can ask, you know, a broader question and hear something. But that said, this is where it gets a little paradoxical and confusing. I have been shown over and over and over again in watching my mother work with my stepfather and her ex-husband, so two virtual kind of husbands at once, where they each come from something in a very different perspective. Whenever they would ask, they would, even if they were arguing, in the middle of arguing, which they did do sometimes, including throw kin in, when the ask happened, they would all hear the same answer. And I don't mean the same necessary words, but the same bridge that brought them all together back into love. from no matter what their mind was saying. And that is what the Foundation for Inner Peace is run on, is that asking in groups of, are we doing the right thing? And we don't do much that we put out that is without literal asking of this voice, but there really is some question when, one of my favorite things, experiences that I have, as I was at a place, and there was all these courses that people were taking, and there was a course in create your own reality. And I was sitting, it was lunchtime, and I was sitting next to a woman who had just taken this class, obviously, because a man came up and said to her, "Oh, I saw you in the class, and wasn't that great?" And she said, "Yes, it was really lovely." And she wanted to work. And he was like, "Well, do you want to go, take a walk afterwards and really talk about what we learned at class?" And she said, "I really have to do this here." And he said, "Well, later this evening, would you like to go out?" And he finally got around to asking her out. And she said, "No, no, thank you." And he got all red in the face. And I was sitting right next to them. It was very hard not to overhear all this. And he said, "I don't understand. I create my own reality. And I am going, I want to have you come out with me." And she said, "Yeah, the only problem is I create mine too." And so there it is, where the things that we hear may be different from each other. But when we, I almost wanted to say to them, let's both sit down together now, instead of him going off in a huff and being embarrassed. And she and I have to say, I'm sorry, but we laughed because it was so funny. But what happens when we ask together? So there was a situation with the foundation where someone was doing some work for the foundation, and they were absolutely convinced that they had to be paid a certain amount, and it wasn't in alignment with what was being heard on our end. And we invited this person and a team of people with this person to come together to listen together and ask on this. And they knew that that's what we were going to do, but we all had lunch and, finally started to talk, and the egos all came in. But this is the reason for that, and that's the reason we can't, and this is the reason we need to, and, and Spirit tells me we must. And it was that, okay, time to ask. And we all closed our eyes. There were 6 of us, all closed our eyes, asked, and we all got the same answer. We all got the same number. We got the same answer. Now, I didn't expect to get that answer. It was a surprise to me, and they didn't expect to, but these were people who were well-versed in asking, and it wasn't new to them. So we were just laughing because it was like, oh, that doesn't necessarily feel good, that answer, but it's the answer. So then it feels incredibly good because something greater is taking charge here. So I would recommend that if you hear something for you, you don't immediately put that onto someone else, but it's for you, you pursue it. And maybe this person was, needed this lesson, and that's why it was an uncomfortable moment and needed to get a broader understanding of what create your own reality means. So I just wanted to introduce that in the mix of everything.
Thank you, Tam. I
Yeah.
love how Jim started and brought up his examples with struggle, and then Diane went into experience of knowing there was a choice, and then Tam, you brought up asking. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there with just what the 3 of you have shared. So it brings up questions that have come in from our audience. But first, because we're on the subject of asking, I have to give it to Kevin Castle, who I'm sure has something to say about asking. Go ahead, Kevin.
I love the aspect of asking. I have daughters, and they're adults now, but they'll come to me and they'll ask me something. I'll have no clue how to answer it, but I assure them, I say, girls, you have an intuitive guide inside of you. You have an intuitive guide. And so people who aren't necessarily in the course or religious or whatever, I talk to them about an intuitive guide. And and even in the 12-step programs, they talk very specifically about that. In the course, what happened to me was, after I did the 365 and you wanted us to, point some things out in the epilogue, which gives me the understanding and the trust that I am never alone. And in the first paragraph, this course is a beginning, not an end. Your friend, capital S, goes with you. You are not alone, period. No one who calls on him can call in vain. Whatever troubles you, be certain that he has the answer and will gladly give it to you if you simply turn to him and ask it of him. And then the last paragraph, it says, God, and I just love this, it says, you do not walk alone. God's angels hover near and all about you. His love surrounds you. And of this be sure, that I will never leave you comfortless. And I actually get a little emotional of that because I take this course for what it is. I don't say, well, it's kind of right. I either take it 100% or not. And when it says God's angels hover near and all about you, I believe it. I believe that if I'm in a situation that I need to be plucked out of, that I'll be plucked out of it. I just have that. It's in it. I like to even think of something as, it's not even faith at this point for me, as far as asking, it's remembering, Remember the last time that you had a question about something similar and you asked me, how'd that go? It's like faith was kind of got me to this point. And now at this point, I just have to remember, that there is a guide inside of me, that there is a voice. At times it is words. I've had, like I said, I give the Holy Spirit 100%. If there's a life, situation, feel free to chime right in. A couple quick little instances, and I had forgotten about this one until I was thinking about talking today. I was at an airport making a connection flight, and I was walking up to where the connection gate was, and Holy Spirit said, don't get on that airplane. Now, this was recent, a few years ago, so I'm in complete trust. I stopped arguing with the Holy Spirit, and especially arguing about don't get on that airplane. So I was like, okay. And I got my phone out. I started to research what other flights. I started to walk down to some other terminal, and I heard over the thing, and it said, passengers flying on so-and-so flight, we've experiencing some malfunction in the airplane and your flight has been canceled. And I just I felt so blessed. It was like, even if they hadn't have found it, I wouldn't have been on that airplane, because it said, don't get on that airplane. I've had it where I was coming down a freeway off ramp. The light was green, and the voice said, "Stop at the green light." And I did. And this 18-wheeler comes smashing, the opposite direction. So, those are like, I want to, kind of like, extreme examples. I have the examples of driving in traffic. Should I turn left or should I turn right? Or, should I be, which way, Holy Spirit? I'm not sure. It says to us, there's no order of difficulty. So, I take that for, 100%. So if I have questions about something little or small, I'm going to ask them. There's times that if I don't hear the voice come back, I say to myself, okay, then I'm going the right way, or I'm doing the right thing. It's not giving me a voice to knock me off course or to direct me in some other direction. So I'm just going to continue on. So that asking, though, for me is something that I actually rely on a daily basis. I'll even, if I'm with somebody who's course-minded or just knows me, I'll even say, we've got to, I need to ask here, I'm not sure at all. And they're kind of used to it now. And, I don't seem as crazy, I guess, as, other people, but I love this at the end of the epilogue, or the epilogue of the lessons. It gives me so much comfort. I will not leave you comfortless. I am with you. Oh, that's all I need. And I will give the answer as long as you turn towards me. Okay. So I love that part.
Me too.
Kevin, I thank you so much for what you said. A really specific example, and I know that people seem to like specific examples, of hearing that voice came to me today before this webinar. This morning I did a podcast, and then I went to visit stepfather number one, who was about to be 97 years old, and spent longer than I anticipated with him. So I had to rush back here to my home for this. And on the way, I was thinking, oh, we have a big panel. Like, do I really need to be on this? And what I heard inside was, you just spent time with stepfather number one, and now your stepfather number two and mother want to be with you. And I said, well, how are they going to be with me? They both passed away, or not really. It depends upon what part of the illusion, if you want to call them transitioned or dead, somewhere in between there. And, but I heard that, and I showed up, and you almost brought me to tears, Kevin, because my mother and stepfather's wedding vows were, I will never leave you comfortless.
Oh,
So there they were. They just showed up, and and that's how that voice works. There's kind of funny Pavlovian rewards that start to happen that are left for you as you start to listen to that voice. And it's like, I don't want to do this. Do I really have to? And they're just these little gems that come with humor. And, it's not like I saw them in the room, but boy, did I feel them when you said that.
And it can also be like, I think Selena said, or I forget who said it, but it can also come in like signs, just as you're driving, like, you've got a question. I have this thing with old antique trucks, like old 57 Chevy trucks. And I know that if I'm asking a question and like, is it a yes or a no? And I'll just be driving, and a 57 truck will pull up next to me, and I'll go, all right, God, I know you're there. Thank you. I feel blessed. The craziest one was, I was in my house on a dead end street, and I was toiling over this question. And I go into the kitchen, and I look out the window, and this old 57 truck turns in my driveway, backs out, and does a U-turn and goes back out. And I was like, whoa, okay, all right. That was pretty clear. So I too, believe in, if the right number comes up on the clock, and, kind of things like that, I believe Holy Spirit uses however he can get my attention, he will use that.
Exactly. My mother's favorite, I would say favorite communication with Holy Spirit was not sitting in silence asking, but license plates. And license plates, she would see, she'd have a question, and then a car would come in front of her, and a license plate would say something. So that said, when my mom was in bed and dying or transitioning, I was holding her, and we had a joke in my childhood about the song Close to You from Karen Carpenter sang it. And I was a Grateful Dead girl, so it was a very schmaltzy song, and it wasn't my style song. But as she was dying and I was holding her, it came out of me to sing her the song. I didn't even know I knew the words, but I'm singing the song to her, and there's so much love there. And it was, all the angels got together when you were born, decided to create a dream come true. And it was just so apropos for that moment. And then that happened. And about a month later, I was driving, and in my car, I never listened to the radio. I only listened to my own music that's on my phone. But suddenly the radio went on and there was the song, Close to You. And I hadn't heard that since like the 70s or whenever it was out. And I thought, is that you? And a car came and I said, what I said is, Mom, is that for me? That's what I said. Mom, is that for me? Is that you? And a car came right in front of my car, and the license plate said, "For you, Tam." And I'm going to take that as Holy Spirit, my mom. That's because it brought me joy, laughter, and feeling non-separate. And we can all say, oh, that's a coincidence, but the more we get into this practice, the more coincidences happen. And that's a sign of that connection with Holy Spirit. It's playful. It's, I'm not saying my mother was Holy Spirit. I'm saying there's an interaction within that, with where Holy Spirit can come through.
I had so many thoughts jumbling in my head. I don't know where to begin. When I was a little girl, my father was a religious man. And I used to say things like, I'm going to ask God about such and such. And my father cautioned me once. He said, you don't bother him with small things. Well, the Course is really saying just the opposite. The Course is saying, you step back into that place where you remember that God is. You step back into that Holy Spirit experience, and you want to do that with every single thing. I love when I get specific affirmation that something is taking care of me. I love it. I honor it. It stretches me from the little Diane that I once thought I was to knowing I'm part of something bigger. But however, and here I don't want to take Jesus away from anyone. I remember once driving home from Ken's on a long drive with a very good friend of mine who had been brought up Catholic, and she was in a state of shock, and she said, I think Ken just took Jesus away from me. So I preface it with this statement. I too, and I don't ride a motorcycle, but when I do anything, I try to remember to say, should I, show me, etc. But I don't want to get so locked in. I do not want to get locked into, but it must go the way that I want. I cannot imagine that Jesus wound up on the cross and said, I trusted you. Why aren't you saving me? Rather, instead, the Jesus of this Course, who wound up on a cross, remembered what he was part of. I think what I'm trying to say is we all, in doing this Course, want to come to more peace. And that means a letting go in almost every situation, which expands us out, which begins to give us experiences that some might call a coincidence, but we recognize give us greater peace and affirm that we're connected to more. But I think that the Course says, please don't stop there. You may be there for 32 lifetimes, but don't stop. Stay open, because there's so much more that you are part of. And that's what I would hope in the learning how to speak to Holy Spirit, which I certainly knew nothing of before I came to this Course. That's what I hope I don't stop short of, not necessarily in this lifetime.
It's really important what Diane was just saying there, because I think if you just heard Tam and I talking about that, people would go, oh, well, I'll hear a voice and see this and magical things in this, but that's a percentage of how it works. Sometimes it's simple things. I just get a sense of peace. So I know that I'm on the right path. I might ask, and, there's just an overall feeling of, as I say, peace, but it's not always like these Hollywood moments of like, no, don't do that, Kevin. You know, I mean, it's sometimes very, very simple and very, you know, direct, but if it is a voice, he never uses a lot of words for me. But I see there, that's just what I didn't want to do. It's going to come through to everybody in a different way. So don't take any of how each of our ways comes through as being like the way. Your way is going to be is going to be beautiful, because this is a course in miracles. It's just a course. It's my course. It's your course. It's this person's course. It's that person's course. And Holy Spirit will communicate with you however you're most comfortable. He doesn't want to, you know, it's not always the same. It's how you feel most comfortable.
Going back to the idea of practice, and especially for people starting out, for years, how I start my day before I get out of bed, if I get out of bed, I say to the Holy Spirit, I give you all of my mind. I'm giving you my mind today. Please guide me, guide my thoughts, guide my words, guide my actions. Sometimes I add guide my emotions, because that's jumbled up in there too. But it's just felt like a very important practice, and it feels like it's setting my intention for the day, and I'm putting my day and myself in the hands of the Holy Spirit, and it works for me. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I remember that my mother used to, my grandmother started it where she would bless so many people. She was getting insomnia practically, because she had so many people by the end of her life to put into her blessings. And then my mother did something similar, but it was more about going away on an airplane. So she had to do certain prayers, and she had to buy insurance to make sure. And her sister disappeared in an airplane disappearance. So she had extra triggers in her personality around that. And she would, you know, if I would go on a flight, she'd like bless every part of the plane. And she got so tired of this as she got older that her prayer was, okay, I give it all over to you. Like, she didn't have to go through every person, and she didn't have to. And it was very, very liberating to her. And when I get up, I just say, go for it. You know, let me experience as much love as possible. And that's it, because the original discipline is great. And some point, there's a tipping point where it does click in, and you're riding. You're just writing it, and that's where the practice is so important, because it does start and it develops and it develops, and then I'm not saying I have it all the time at all, but the balance is way, way greater in that practice.
There's times that I'm gonna do something and I'll just say, Holy Spirit, I have no idea how to do this. I need some help. Just please guide me. I am open to anything. Please guide me. And I love what you just said, Tam, that there is a tipping point. I just love that. I've never phrased it that way, that it's not always asking it. You just feel like you're doing the right thing. You feel like you're just being led to do the right thing. Yeah. And then there's times where my fear comes in and it kind of clouds me feeling connected. And that's when I have to pause and ask. But there's times where it just kind of flows through me. And that's beautiful how you phrase that, Tam. Thank you.
Well, so many people don't realize that there's a waiting for the ask. You know, that as you read, just ask, we'll show up. But there's a lot of people who don't even know how to ask. So on this particular topic, I would say, if you want to hear the voice more clearly, ask. They turn it up, amp it up, and keep asking. And then get a little bit past your asking to receive.
I love that, Tam. So many questioners wrote in, said, oh, but what am I doing wrong? Is there a certain way I should be asking? I'm still experiencing the struggle with this, and that.
We do get so involved in our question. and there's so much energy and you're just stuck in the question and the ask, rather than, okay, I asked now. Let's see what happens, because it is in that neutral zone that it's like a wider aperture for spirit to come in when you're not so obsessed. And I remember there was a Chinese medicine, I would call him a medicine man, but he was the head of the Black sect of Tibetan Buddhism. And he gave all these prescriptions out for people. And Whit, my stepfather, number 2, asked him, it's like, okay, you have just said in order for that person to get to sell their house that they want so badly, they have to dance under the moon with chicken feathers up their butt and 3 times circle. I'm making that up, but something really absurd. And he smiled wryly, the professor, which is what he was called, Professor Lin. And he said, and Whit said, what does that really do? And he said, it gets them off the question. It distracts them from all the energy going, I want this to happen, and when will it happen, and when will I hear it? So there is great wisdom in what can you ask, and then there's trust. What can get you off the obsession of the asking, so that there is that opening to flood and come in.
So important. Go ahead, Diane.
And a kind of counterpoint to that, not only distract yourself from the question, so to speak, but begin to develop the habit of noticing when you're frightened. Begin to develop the habit of when you're judging. I mean, those are the 2 big ego defenses that I'm really familiar with. Notice it and learn to smile. Isn't it funny that you spent all this time reading this course, talking about this course, and yet there's that judgment that comes up, and then be willing to step back and know that it's no big deal. It's just your fear. And the more you do that, the more you're directly releasing yourself, the more you're going to be open to stepping into that presence. At least that's what worked for me, because I spent a lot of years berating myself because I asked and I asked and I asked and I couldn't hear. Well, there's a line in the course that says, you're not going to hear the voice for God if you're filled with guilt and fear. So look at what you're choosing to experience, which may be guilt and fear or some form of it, or specialness, make them think blah, blah, blah. Look at that, own it, and be willing to step back. And from that, you really begin to let go of a lot of thoughts about yourself that you're not even conscious that you're holding. And then you're beginning to go home. I think it's interesting that all of us have said through our own personalities how the Course has transformed for us our experience of being. Different words, different personalities, but the Course has transformed our experience of being. It is a remarkable path home if it is your path.
Beautiful. I love how you shared. What a great tip. Learn to know yourself, learn to become aware, learn to know when you're experiencing fear. That's so powerful. It's so easy to just walk and go about our day and then get into our own mind again and not really be aware of that. So I love that extra tip. As we are getting ready to close our conversation today, I just wanted to give you all just a last chance to go around the room with any closing thoughts or, your top 1 or 2 tips on listening to the Holy Spirit, or what's most important for our attendees to take away from today. Go ahead, whoever raised their hand. Jim.
I just wanted to jump in and say that through our conversation today and talking about the universality of the Course and how everyone does it the way that they're guided to do it. And there's a section under what is the Course, where this paragraph says the curriculum the Course proposes is carefully conceived and is explained step by step at both the theoretical and practical levels. It emphasizes application rather than theory and experience rather than theology. It specifically states that a quote universal theology is not a universal theology is impossible but a universal experience is not only possible, but necessary. And that's from the manual, page 77. Although Christian in statement, the course deals with universal spiritual themes. It emphasizes that it is but one version of the universal curriculum. There are many others, this one differing from them only in form. They all lead to God in the end. And I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing their own flavor, their own experience. And I just, whenever someone gets hung up on whether it's Christian terms or Jesus or whatever, I just love this course, this book, because it really makes it clear that it's not about superstition, it's not about dogma, it's not about ego, and it's just as simple as just universal, infinite, absolute, total love, and love for ourselves, love for each other, love for everything that appears to exist, but we know that it is just God in disguise. So thank you for letting me be here.
My experience of the course shifted for me when I understood about judgment. It's actually my interpretation of how I practice the word forgiveness. It's non-judgment. And the times when the voice is like kind of just kind of turned off is when I'm in self-judgment, and self-judgment is almost debilitating to me, that I use this course to get off of that self-judgment. Judgment to me is, can really, keep me from experiencing that love. The issue that I've had is that this course sometimes lays out certain things that then I pull out this golden hammer that says A Course in Miracles on it, and I use that to beat myself up because it says, oh, do this 5 minutes a day and do this and do that. And I have to be very cautious of judging myself with this beautiful program, this beautiful course. So I have to remove all judgment on me. In fact, that's my banner thing about me and my life is, if I'm judging me, I got to stop doing that. That's the thing. Or if I'm judging somebody else, it helps me to get very clear when I'm not judging somebody else. I feel better, like the course. As I give, I receive. I love the concept of staying off of judgment.
Practice, practice, practice. It's a practice, so practice it. Also, it's coming up, I don't know why, but just, once in a while you hear somebody say, well, I haven't really read the whole text, or, yeah, I read it. Look, that got that over with. Now I just do the lessons. And there's no right or wrong, but for me, the text has just so much richness. As the Course says, that's where the meat of the meat of it is, it's the workbook is the practice, but the text explains the foundation of it all. So don't skip anything. Don't skip the reviews. Don't skip any of the every freaking word in this book is important. And for me, it's a lifetime thing. I'm just going to keep reading it, text, workbook, whatever, all of it. So practice, practice, practice. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged. We've all been discouraged. I've had moments recently where it's like, are you kidding me? Keep going, and just keep asking. And Holy Spirit always comes through for me. And Jesus, both of them. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
But also say they are companions to each other. They came in 3 different volumes, and they are companions. To do one without the other is a choice, but if you want more richness in it, the jewels are right there. And at the same time, if you start punishing yourself for not doing it the exact way, the way it gives is the way it really does beautifully unfold. It was planned for a psychological release and unfolding continuously. So that's how it was structured. That said, in the paradox that is always spirit, if it also says, if you do just one lesson, perfectly, it will be the same as doing all of them. So see where your heart really leads you, and I mean your heart and not your mind in this. And also the key, and it was the title of this whole webinar, is listening. Learn how to listen. It's you, and if you find you don't hear well enough, then say, like you would say to a friend, I'm a little hard of hearing, can you speak up? You know, raise the volume, please, and then listen. So that's how I would go about it.
My only final thought is it's a path. It's a long path. It says it can be done in an instant, but we're not there yet. This illusion is very compelling. Most of us do identify with this body and this personality and this story. But I think if it is your path, no, not I think, if it is your path, you will have a better life. I'm not speaking of in the physical world. You will have a more peaceful and a more joyful life while you're walking the path than you would have if you were not actively walking the path. So if you're called to read it, if you're called to experience it, it's a nice invitation.
What a great way to end us today. We want to thank all of our panelists today, and we thank all of the attendees who are also joining us today. I want to share a few foundation resources that may be helpful for you, so keep an eye on the group chat for website links that we will be pasting there. A Course in Miracles web edition is more than a year old now. Since 2021, the ACIM web edition contains the complete course, including the full text from each workbook lesson, along with accompanying audio, so you may read, share your favorite quote, and listen to A Course in Miracles from any of your devices. Just go to acim.org/ACIM and check it out there. We also want to thank all who have donated to the Foundation for Inner Peace. Your donation makes a difference, no matter the amount. Our listeners can visit our online donor page at acim.org/donate. As we wrap up the live feature today, a brief survey should display on your screen. So let us know how we're doing and what kind of content you would like to see. Additionally, you can always check our website's event page for registrations of the latest webinar offerings. That'll be near the top. And once you get to the event page, you just scroll down and you will see webinar recordings posted, the most recent one first. All of the webinars the Foundation has put together is on our event page. You can also follow us on YouTube at our channel, Foundation for Inner Peace. So definitely check us out there. With love and gratitude, thank you for being here, and we look forward to having you next time. Bye-bye.